The ground beneath him vanished in a splash of mud and water. John's heart lurched as he plunged into a churning, murky pit. The first thing he noticed was the smell, iron and rot, thick and choking, filling his nostrils. Then, the sound, the snapping, teeth-grinding terror of dozens of crocodiles closing in. He thrashed, and the water hit his face, cold and unforgiving, blinding him for a moment. Somewhere beneath the surface, something brushed against his leg, and he screamed, not just from fear, but disbelief. He had fallen into a trap that should have been impossible to survive. Yet, even in those first desperate seconds, a strange sensation crawled up his spine. Not fear. Something else. Something impossible. It was as if he wasn't entirely alone, though who, or what, could possibly be there with him. And then, the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life: how is he going to get out alive? John wasn't a thrill seeker. Not exactly. He was a biologist, quietly curious, the sort of man who measured the world in patterns and probabilities. That Saturday morning, he had set out to observe the local crocodile population, documenting their behavior for a report no one would read, in a remote part of the forest. He wore boots and gloves, a notebook tucked under his arm, but none of that mattered now. Every adult human who had ventured here before him, the villagers had said, never returned. John had laughed it off. Local superstition, he thought. But the swamp had its own rules, and those rules did not care for his credentials. The pit itself was unassuming from the bank, a shallow depression, water dark as coffee, surrounded by reeds and mud, but underneath, the earth had hollowed unpredictably, and the crocodiles were waiting. They were patient predators, ancient and silent until provoked. John's water surged over John's head as he thrashed, arms clawing at mud, boots slipping. The first crocodile snapped near his leg, teeth glinting. Panic surged, raw and urgent. Every instinct screamed, fight. Every memory of his careful, measured life was useless here. Breathe. Keep moving. Don't give them an easy meal, he muttered, though his voice was barely audible over the splash in his own ragged breathing. He kicked, trying to climb a slippery mound of mud at the edge, but it gave way under his weight, sending him back into the fray. And then, he heard it. A strange, low humming sound, almost like a chant, almost like music. Not loud, not intrusive, but undeniable. It came from somewhere above the pit, echoing over the water. John froze, mid-thrash, adrenaline racing. Who, or what, is there? A shadow moved along the rim of the pit, a figure, or maybe just a trick of light. Something in the way the water rippled suggested intelligence, presence. And though terror still gripped him, a flicker of hope emerged. Not luck. Not skill. Something else was coming. Something that would change the story of this pit forever. And in that moment, as he fought to keep his head above water, John would later realize that the first ripple was the very moment everything began to change. Everything. Startled, wide-eyed face as a shadowy, unexplained form touches his shoulder under the churning water. John's breath came in ragged gasps. Mud clung to his arms, his legs ached, and the water, once an indifferent mass, now felt alive, pressing, threatening, judging. Every snap of a crocodile's jaw seemed closer, sharper, personal. He had reached the limits of his strength, yet something wouldn't let him surrender. Something unseen. And then it happened. A ripple, almost gentle, but deliberate, brushed against his side again. This time, unmistakably, it pushed. Not violently, like a human might, but with a steady, deliberate force that lifted him slightly, enough to relieve his weight from the sinking mud. John froze. His mind screamed rational explanations, currents, chance, but deep down, he knew this was intentional. Something was helping him. Something alive, yet not like any animal he had ever studied. Time became elastic. Seconds stretched like hours as John fought for each inch of the bank. The crocodiles snapped closer, their yellow eyes gleaming. And yet, the presence, whatever it was, remained. Another push, another lift, just when he was about to go under. He remembered his childhood fascination with animals, the way he would watch small creatures move with precision and intelligence. But this was something entirely beyond comprehension. In one chaotic moment, a crocodile lunged directly at his leg. Panic surged. John kicked instinctively, but then felt a force redirect his leg just enough. The crocodile snapped past harmlessly, its jaws closing with a wet clack in the mud behind him. Impossible, he muttered under his breath. There's no way. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Something was saving him. Something that did not belong to the known rules of the swamp. Later, John would realize that the first time the force intervened was not an isolated miracle, but part of a pattern, a secret the swamp had held for generations. For a moment, panic receded, replaced by awe. John's thoughts flickered to his wife, to the life he had yet to live, and to the mysteries that had always seemed far away in the forests and rivers. Now, they were real. Not stories, not legends. Real. The water was still churning, crocodiles circling, but the rhythm of the mysterious force provided a fragile lifeline. It was as though the swamp itself, or something in it, had chosen him. And that thought was terrifying and beautiful at once. He reached for a thick branch, half submerged and coated in mud. With the unseen force subtly guiding him, he leveraged himself upward, inch by grueling inch. His arms burned, his lungs screamed for air, but the rhythm of support continued, steady and gentle. Suddenly, a larger snap echoed through the pit. One of the crocodiles, bigger than the others, lunged with terrifying speed. John's heart froze. His arms trembled, his hands slipped on the slick mud. He knew instinctively, without the unseen presence, this would be the end. The water surged again, not the crocodile, but the force. It lifted him just enough to roll to the side, barely escaping the snapping jaws. Heart pounding, he gasped in disbelief. He was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he was alive. And yet, his mind couldn't stop racing. Why me? Why now? And as he clung to that branch, one thought dominated his mind: if this wasn't luck, what was it? And why would anything intervene for him in a pit designed to take lives? Minutes stretched. Each movement became a battle. Exhaustion clawed at his body. He wondered how much longer he could hold on. And then, he saw it. A dark, glistening figure surfaced just ahead. Not a crocodile. Not human. Something else. Its eyes, soft, intelligent, unthreatening, locked with his for a moment. A silent communication passed between them: I'm here. You will survive. John's mind reeled. His rational brain rejected it, but his body believed. Every push, every lift, every subtle guidance had come from this entity. It was real. Alive. And it had been orchestrating his survival all along. Later, John would understand that this being had saved others before him, in ways history had quietly forgotten, but that first look, that moment of recognition, would forever change how he saw the world. With one final push from the mysterious presence, John scrambled onto firmer ground. Mud clung to him, his clothes torn, skin raw. His chest heaved. His legs trembled. He looked back at the pit, at the crocodiles that had almost claimed him, and then down at the shadow that lingered at the edge of the water. It was still there, watching. waiting. And for reasons John could not yet understand, it had chosen him. A single thought dominated his mind: I am alive. But I am changed. John lay on the muddy bank, chest heaving, arms trembling. Every muscle screamed, every breath burned. The pit behind him, once a chaotic whirl of snapping jaws and murky water, had grown eerily still. But John knew better. He had felt it, something alive, deliberate, present. Something that had guided him from the edge of death. He didn't speak. Words would not capture it. Instead, he stared at the water, watching tiny ripples creep across the surface, as though the swamp itself breathed. And then, slowly, a larger ripple appeared, deliberate and precise, moving toward him. He froze. The rational part of his mind shouted, impossible. It's water. It's reflection. It's a trick of light. But the rest of him, the part that had just survived the pit, knew the truth. Something, someone, was still there. Waiting. Watching. As his heart slowed, John allowed himself to think. All the lessons from textbooks, fieldwork, careful calculations, they meant nothing here. The swamp had its own laws, and survival depended on noticing the unnoticed. On trusting what seemed impossible. He remembered stories he had heard as a boy, whispered by villagers around fires, tales of rivers and forests protecting those who respected them, of creatures acting in ways humans could not comprehend. He had dismissed them. Laughed at them. Yet now, lying on the bank, mud and water soaking through his clothes, he realized the stories had been warnings, and promises. And you, a voice whispered in his memory, his own, perhaps, or the echo of the swamp itself, you were never alone. Minutes passed. John sat upright, shivering, mud sliding down his arms. And then he saw it clearly, a dark shape breaking the water's surface near the pit. Not a crocodile, not human, but something unmistakably intelligent. Its eyes met his, calm, patient, almost knowing. John's mind refused the rational explanation. Yet every instinct screamed the same truth: this is what saved me. It lingered for a moment longer, then slowly moved back toward the depths of the pit. And in that movement, John felt a current of something profound: protection, intelligence, a force beyond comprehension. He had survived, yes. But the experience had changed him. Forever. Even as relief washed over him, John could not stop asking the questions that now dominated his mind. What was that? Why did it save me? Had it done this for others before me? And will it do it again? These questions, unanswerable in the moment, created a mental tension, the Zygarnik effect at full force. The viewer is left hanging with John, desperate for answers, hooked for the next part of the story. He forced himself to rise, legs unsteady, arms trembling, body coated in mud. Each step toward the forest edge was agony, yet with every movement, he felt a strange connection to the swamp, to the water, to the unseen force. He realized something fundamental: survival had not been his alone. It had required trust, faith in something he could neither see nor fully understand. And in that trust, he found a clarity, a calm, a new sense of purpose. Sitting at the edge of the forest, John reflected on everything that had happened. He thought of the villagers' warnings, the legends of the swamp, and the countless things he had dismissed as superstition. And now he understood, the world held forces beyond explanation, beyond rationality. Forces that could intervene, guide, and save, if only one paid attention. And maybe, he whispered to himself, they choose who they save. This reflection is designed to tie viewers emotionally to the story's moral, hope, trust, and awareness of the extraordinary in everyday life. As night began to fall, John looked back at the pit. The water was calm now, betraying no hint of the chaos earlier. Yet he knew the memory would haunt him forever. The presence that had saved him remained a mystery. Its motives, origins, and true nature unknown. But one truth was certain: he had survived something miraculous. Something impossible. And whatever had saved him, it was still out there, waiting, watching, patient. The sun had set, leaving the forest awash in violet shadows. John sat on a fallen log at the edge of the swamp, knees drawn to his chest, hands shaking. Mud dried on his skin, stiff and cracked. His mind raced, replaying every second in the pit. Every splash, every snap of teeth, every inexplicable push that had kept him alive. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange calm persisted. He knew, somehow, that the entity, whatever it was still near. Watching. Waiting. Patient. The question burned in him: why me? John's body ached as he stood. Every movement reminded him of the pit's brutality. His muscles trembled with fatigue, but the experience had left something deeper than physical exhaustion. It had left a pulse of awe, a quiet reverence for life's fragility. He took slow, deliberate steps back toward the main path, mindful of every sound, every rustle. The forest seemed alive in a way he had never noticed before. A distant splash echoed softly, reminding him that the pit and its hidden guardian were still there, beyond sight, beyond explanation. By the time he reached the ranger station near the forest's edge, dawn was approaching. 2 local guides were waiting, relief washing over their faces as they spotted him. "John. We thought," one began, but words failed him. Instead, he simply shook his head. Words could not convey what had happened, what he had felt, what had saved him. Yet as he recounted a fragmented version of the pit, of the pushes, the guiding force, one guide's eyes widened, not with skepticism, but recognition. "You're lucky," she said softly. "The swamp, it chooses sometimes. It's been watching. Helping. But few know. Fewer survive." Over the next hours, John and the guides returned to the edge of the pit. His rational mind demanded evidence, while his instincts demanded respect. They found small, inexplicable signs, water ripples that moved without wind, subtle disturbances in mud suggesting weight where nothing should be, faint scratches along the bank that did not match any known animal. "Someone, or something, is marking this place," John whispered. One guide nodded. "Or protecting it. Maybe both." John reached toward the water instinctively. The same ripple appeared, slow, deliberate, a gentle push against his hand. He withdrew, startled. It was as if the entity was acknowledging him, a silent message: "You are part of this now." The guides watched, cautious. "It recognizes you," one said. "Some say the swamp chooses the worthy, those who survive and respect it." John felt a shiver, not fear, but wonder. His mind struggled to reconcile logic and instinct, but deep down, he understood, the swamp was alive in ways humans could not fully grasp. As they left the pit behind for the day, John's thoughts churned. He wanted to rationalize, to explain, to document scientifically. Yet every observation defied known laws. The precise pushes that saved him. The calm, deliberate presence beneath the surface. Signs that suggested intention, intelligence, and perhaps even morality. He felt humbled, small in the face of something incomprehensible, yet alive with curiosity. And beneath that curiosity, a quiet, persistent question: was it testing me? Watching me? Preparing me for something more? That night, alone in his cabin near the forest edge, John could not sleep. He replayed every detail of the pit, the snapping jaws, the pushes, the eyes of the entity glinting in the water. And then, a sound. Not loud, not threatening, but deliberate. A ripple against the cabin's window, soft and rhythmic. His pulse quickened. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're still here, aren't you?" And for a brief instant, he felt the same calm, guiding presence he had felt in the pit. A message, not in words, but in sensation: I am here. Watch, learn, survive. John realized that the swamp, and whatever dwelled within it, was not done with him. Surviving the pit had been just the first step. The entity had chosen him for a reason, one he could not yet understand. And in that moment, a final thought gripped him. If this was only the beginning, what comes next could change everything I thought I knew about life, survival, and the unseen forces around us. Dawn broke over the swamp with a quiet intensity. Mist hovered above the water, curling around gnarled roots and reeds, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. John stepped carefully along the muddy path, senses heightened. Every sound, bird calls, distant splashes, rustling leaves, felt amplified, each one potentially signaling danger. The memory of the pit pressed on him, sharp and unrelenting. But more than fear, he felt curiosity, an irresistible pull to understand what had saved him. The mysterious force wasn't just a guardian, it was testing him, teaching him, guiding him. As he approached the pit once more, John noticed the small clues he had overlooked before: a broken branch pointing toward a safer path, water ripples that hinted at hidden currents, patterns in the mud suggesting the entity's presence. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Every instinct told him, follow the signs. Learn the rhythm. Trust it. He paused, placing his hand in the water. The familiar gentle push returned, almost like a heartbeat under his palm. This was not mere coincidence. Something intelligent, deliberate, and immensely powerful was teaching him to navigate the swamp safely. Suddenly, a loud splash erupted nearby. One of the larger crocodiles emerged, jaws wide, teeth gleaming in the morning light. John froze, heart racing. This was no minor threat, this was the very danger that had nearly ended him the day before. But then, the ripple returned. The entity's presence, subtle but unmistakable, shifted the crocodile's attention. It veered away, distracted or controlled in some way John couldn't explain. He realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that survival in this swamp wasn't about brute force or cunning alone. It was about recognizing and respecting the hidden forces at play. Over the next few hours, John began to observe patterns. The entity wasn't just reacting, it was communicating. Small nudges guided him past deep mud patches. Ripples warned him of lurking predators. Subtle currents shifted in ways that suggested intelligence and intention. John took careful notes, both in his mind and in a notebook he carried. Every detail mattered. Every interaction was a lesson. And though he couldn't yet explain the force scientifically, he felt a growing trust, an understanding that survival required partnership with the swamp's hidden intelligence. The physical strain of the swamp was relentless, but John's emotional transformation was equally profound. Fear had given way to respect, awe, and humility. He felt alive in a way he had never experienced, a mix of vulnerability and exhilaration, the rare clarity that comes from facing forces far beyond one's control. He whispered to himself, I don't just survive here. I am part of it. I see it. I feel it. As John explored deeper into the swamp, he noticed something unusual, patterns in the water and mud that repeated, almost like symbols. He could not understand them yet, but instinct told him they were significant. The entity seemed to guide him toward them, testing his perception, his patience, and his ability to trust. Each push, each ripple, each subtle current was part of a lesson he hadn't realized he needed. He realized that surviving the pit had been only the first step. The swamp, and its guardian, had far greater lessons in store, lessons that might challenge everything he thought he knew about life, survival, and the unseen forces surrounding him. Suddenly, a loud cracking noise echoed through the swamp. John spun toward the sound. A tree had fallen across a narrow path, blocking his only route back to safety. Panic surged for a moment, but then he felt it, the familiar subtle push in the water, guiding him toward a hidden, safer path. He hesitated, then trusted it. Following the unseen force, he maneuvered through a narrow channel, branches scraping his arms, mud pulling at his boots, until he emerged on solid ground. Relief washed over him, but so did a new realization. The swamp was testing him, shaping him, preparing him for challenges he could not yet imagine. As John finally paused to catch his breath, he looked back at the swamp. Mist clung to the water, obscuring the pit, the reeds, and every hidden movement. Yet he felt it again, a presence, patient, intelligent, and alive. Waiting. Watching. Guiding. And he realized, surviving the pit had been only the beginning. What awaited him next was unknown, dangerous, and miraculous. John paused at the edge of a deeper section of the swamp, where the water ran dark and still, almost black. Mist swirled thickly here, curling around roots and low-hanging branches. The pit was behind him, but the swamp felt alive again, as though it knew he was watching, measuring, learning. He clenched his fists, recalling the pushes, nudges, and subtle ripples that had guided him before. Each one had been a lesson in perception, patience, and trust. And now, he realized, he was being tested again. A sudden noise shattered the silence, the splash of a large creature breaking the water. One of the crocodiles surged toward John with terrifying speed. He froze, heart pounding. Survival instincts screamed to flee. But then, the water near him shifted, deliberately, predictably. A subtle push guided him off the main path, toward a narrow, hidden channel through reeds. He hesitated, recognizing the same rhythm he had felt before. The entity was intervening. "Trust it," he whispered under his breath, moving along the channel. Every muscle tensed, every step a careful negotiation with mud, water, and fear. As he progressed, John noticed patterns in the swamp he hadn't before, small circles in the water, faint scratches on branches, and subtle shifts in the reeds. He realized the entity was not just guiding him, it was communicating. Not with words, but with patterns, nudges, and movements. And the implication was staggering. It had done this before, countless times, for reasons unknown. John paused, letting the realization settle. Survival here wasn't merely luck, it was a partnership, a dance with something intelligent, deliberate, and ancient. Suddenly, the channel narrowed sharply. Muddy banks on either side threatened to trap him. John's boots slipped. Panic rose. A large shadow moved beneath the water, a crocodile, larger than any he had faced before. He froze, remembering the pushes, the gentle guidance that had saved him before. Slowly, he stepped, following subtle currents and the rhythm of the entity's nudges. The crocodile lunged, and he rolled instinctively, guided by the invisible hand beneath the surface. He reached solid ground, chest heaving, body trembling, yet alive. The swamp was not done. Ahead, a fallen tree blocked the path entirely. No visible channel, no apparent way forward. John froze. Then, the subtle ripple returned. It moved along the water's surface in a deliberate pattern, almost like a signal, "There is a way. Follow carefully." Trusting the sensation, John crouched low and waded along a barely visible underwater path, branches brushing his arms, mud tugging at his boots. Every step required focus, patience, and unwavering trust. At last, John reached a wider stretch of water. He paused, chest heaving, mud and water covering him. Then he saw it, the entity, fully visible for the first time, hovering near the water's surface. Not a crocodile, not human, but a sleek, shadowy form with intelligence glowing in its faintly reflective eyes. It moved with purpose, deliberate, as if acknowledging his trust and resilience. For the first time, John felt an almost tangible connection, an understanding that he was being guided not randomly, but for a reason beyond his comprehension. John sank to the bank, exhaustion and awe blending. He realized something profound. This swamp, this entity, had tested him, taught him, and preserved him. And yet, it demanded more: awareness, humility, and trust. He whispered, almost reverently, "I understand. I'll follow. I'll learn." For the first time, fear was replaced by respect, awe, and an unspoken bond. He knew the entity had plans for him, lessons he was not yet ready to fully comprehend. As John rested, he noticed a series of faint ripples moving away from the pit, deeper into the swamp. The entity was retreating but not disappearing. He understood, in a moment of quiet clarity, surviving the pit and the swamp's initial trials was only the beginning. The entity had a larger purpose, and John was now part of something far greater than himself, a hidden pattern, a secret guardianship, a test that would push him beyond anything he had imagined. The swamp was alive in a way John had never imagined. Mist curled thickly over the black water, weaving through ancient roots and half-submerged branches. Every sound, dripping water, distant croaks, the rustle of leaves, felt magnified, warning and guiding simultaneously. John's boots sank into mud with each step, but his focus was absolute. He had survived the pit. He had learned the rhythm of the entity's guidance. And now, he was being drawn toward the heart of the swamp, toward the place the unseen guardian had always wanted him to see. He inhaled deeply, the humid air filling his lungs, bracing himself for what lay ahead. Every step carried danger. Crocodiles lurked in the shadows, mud threatened to swallow him, and the thick undergrowth clawed at his arms and legs. But the ripple returned, a subtle, almost imperceptible push beneath the water, guiding him through a safer path. John's heart raced. Each push was a test, each subtle movement a message: observe, trust, survive. He realized something he had not considered before: surviving was not enough. The swamp demanded understanding. To leave unchanged was impossible. As he progressed deeper, John noticed subtle signs: small concentric ripples in the water, scratches on tree trunks, a faint shimmer in the mist. It was as though the swamp itself was alive, orchestrating his path. Then, he saw movement, a shadow beneath the surface, sleek, deliberate, eyes glinting faintly. Not threatening. Watching. Waiting. For the first time, John felt that the entity was not only guiding him but also evaluating him, silently asking, "Are you ready for what comes next?" Suddenly, a large tree limb fell across his path, snapping loudly in the swamp. Crocodiles stirred nearby, drawn by the commotion. Panic surged. But John remembered the rhythm of the entity's guidance. He paused, placing his hands in the water. A gentle push redirected him toward a narrow, hidden channel. It was risky, almost imperceptible, but it was a path forward. Heart pounding, he followed, every step a delicate negotiation with mud, water, and fear. The crocodiles snapped dangerously close, yet the entity's subtle interventions kept him alive. Finally, John reached a wider section of the swamp, water black and calm. Here, he saw the faint symbols again, concentric circles, scratches, and patterns in the mud. He realized this was a map, or perhaps a message, a trail laid out by the entity. He paused, feeling awe and reverence. This was more than survival. This was a lesson in perception, patience, and trust. The entity had been preparing him for something greater all along. John knelt by the water, letting his hands trail through the surface. He felt the subtle rhythm, the pushes, nudges, and currents that had saved him and guided him this far. Awe and humility washed over him. "I don't know why," he whispered, "but I trust you." In that moment, he realized that survival in this swamp was never about strength alone. It was about awareness, intuition, and humility, a dance with forces beyond comprehension. As he continued, the swamp seemed to grow darker, denser. A sudden roar of water startled him. A previously hidden pit opened ahead, deeper than any he had encountered, filled with mud and unseen currents. Crocodiles circled the edges. John's heart raced. He had survived before, but this was different. He paused, feeling the entity's presence beneath the surface. A subtle push, guiding, directing, almost like a hand pointing toward a safe path across the pit. Trusting it, he began to cross. Each step was precarious. Every movement mattered. The mud tried to pull him down. Water lapped at his knees. Crocodiles snapped dangerously close. And then, a sudden surge of support from beneath. He stumbled, almost falling, but was lifted by the unseen force. Heart racing, he reached the other side, gasping for breath, alive, and aware that the entity's intervention had been precise, deliberate, and crucial. As he collapsed onto solid ground, chest heaving, he saw the entity fully emerge near the pit's edge. Sleek, dark, deliberate, its eyes glinting faintly in the dim light. It lingered, watching him, evaluating him. John realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, surviving the pit and navigating the swamp's trials was only the beginning. The entity had a purpose, a plan, and the ultimate trial was yet to come. The swamp had grown darker, denser, almost suffocating in its stillness. John's legs ached, his arms trembled, but his mind was sharper than ever. Every sound, the distant splash of water, the rustle of unseen creatures, the subtle shifting of mud beneath his feet, alerted him to danger. He had survived the pit. He had navigated treacherous channels. And now, he was standing on the brink of the swamp's heart, where the entity waited, its presence palpable, intelligent, and immense. Ahead, the swamp opened into a wide, churning pool of black water. Crocodiles patrolled the edges, their eyes gleaming. Jagged roots protruded unpredictably from the depths. The entity hovered near the far side, sleek, shadowy, its gaze fixed on John. John's heart pounded. The path forward was dangerous, almost impossibly so. He remembered every lesson: patience, observation, trust in the subtle guidance, awareness of hidden signs. He stepped forward, hand brushing the water's surface. A ripple responded, a deliberate push, subtle but unmistakable, guiding him toward a hidden path across the pool. Halfway across, the mud beneath his boots shifted suddenly, threatening to pull him under. Crocodiles snapped nearby, teeth gleaming in dim light. Panic surged, but John remembered the entity's rhythm, the subtle nudges and pushes that had guided him so far. He froze, observing the ripples, the patterns, the currents. Then, with deliberate, careful steps, he moved exactly where the unseen force guided him. Each movement required precision, focus, and unwavering trust. He felt it again, a presence beneath the water, not just guiding, but protecting. Not in random acts, but in deliberate, calculated interventions. Reaching the far side, John finally saw the entity fully. Not a crocodile. Not human. Something far older than memory, sleek, dark, and intelligent, with eyes reflecting wisdom, calm, and power. It regarded him silently, its presence radiating both judgment and acceptance. The swamp's trials had been designed not to harm, but to teach, to measure courage, trust, and awareness. John sank to the muddy bank, exhausted and awed. He realized the entity had chosen him, not randomly, but for qualities it recognized: resilience, humility, and the ability to see beyond the obvious. John felt a profound shift within himself. Fear had transformed into respect, panic into patience, doubt into understanding. Every trial, every push, every subtle ripple had prepared him for this moment. He whispered, almost reverently, "I understand now. I see." The entity lingered, its eyes softening, as if acknowledging that John had passed the ultimate test. And then, it submerged gently, vanishing beneath the surface, but leaving a subtle, persistent ripple as a mark of its presence. John understood something profound. Survival was never about brute force or luck alone. It was about awareness, humility, observation, trust in the unseen, and partnership with forces beyond comprehension. He realized the entity's purpose, not simply to save, but to teach, to guide those who could learn, who could respect, who could grow. And perhaps, John whispered, the swamp chooses not just who survives, but who understands. Psychological lever/identity bonding. The audience internalizes the lesson: courage, awareness, and trust in the unseen can shape outcomes in life's most dangerous and mysterious moments. The swamp returned to its quiet stillness. Crocodiles slinked back into hidden waters. The black water calmed. And John, soaked, mud-covered, yet alive, understood that the trials had changed him forever. He would never see the swamp the same way again. And he would never see life, danger, or survival as mere chance. Even as he turned to leave, John felt the faintest ripple beneath the water, a reminder, subtle and deliberate, that the entity was still watching, still guiding, and that the swamp had more lessons to teach, for him or for the next person who wandered too close. If the pit had been the beginning, what lay beyond it was a mystery yet to unfold. Image prompt: twilight swamp with subtle ripples, shadows moving beneath the water, mist curling, hinting at unseen presence. John stood at the swamp's edge as the sun dipped low, golden light filtering through the mist. The pit, the narrow channels, the deep black waters, all of it lay behind him, now a tapestry of trials, lessons, and survival. His body was exhausted, mud-streaked, bruised, but his mind felt lighter, sharpened, alive in ways he could never have imagined. He recalled the exact moment he fell into the crocodile pit, the panic, the teeth snapping, the cold water swallowing him. And then he remembered what had saved him, something unseen, deliberate, and impossibly intelligent. The thought returned with clarity: what saved me will shatter everything I knew about survival, trust, and the unseen forces around us. Every trial had left an imprint on John, not just physical scars, but mental clarity. He now understood, survival was never just about instinct or luck. It was about attention, trust, and humility. The subtle pushes had taught patience. The hidden channels had taught awareness. The entity's presence had taught reverence. He realized the swamp was more than danger, it was a teacher. And he had passed its tests, not by force, but by seeing, listening, and trusting. John's thoughts drifted back to the moment he first fell, the panic, the uncertainty, the terror. And he smiled faintly. Survival had felt random then. But now he saw a pattern, a purpose, a design in what had seemed chaotic. He understood the entity's role, not simply a guardian, but a teacher, a guide, a force testing his courage and perception. The pit had been only the first chapter. Every ripple, every subtle push had been deliberate, preparing him for the lessons of the swamp's heart. And in that moment, John realized the greatest shift wasn't physical, it was within him. Fear had transformed into awe. Panic into awareness. Doubt into humility. Even as he prepared to leave, a subtle ripple on the water reminded him of the entity. It had not vanished, it lingered, observing, guiding, ever-present but unseen. John whispered to himself, almost reverently, "I am ready for whatever comes next." The swamp remained silent, yet alive. And John knew, without needing words, that its lessons were far from over. There would be more trials, more revelations, more moments that would challenge him to see beyond fear, beyond instinct, into the rhythm of life itself. John understood something universal. Life itself is a swamp of unseen challenges, hidden dangers, and invisible guidance. What saves us may not always be visible. What teaches us may not always be understood. He realized the truth of his experience. Courage and awareness matter more than brute strength. Trust and humility can navigate even the most perilous situations. And sometimes, survival comes from recognizing the invisible forces that shape our world, and aligning with them rather than resisting. John turned away from the swamp, walking toward the path that would lead him home. He felt transformed, alive, and aware. And in that moment, he spoke quietly to the viewer, as if sharing a secret. If this story touched you, if you felt the invisible forces guiding you, the moments that shape you when you least expect it, you belong here. Follow the path, pay attention, and you'll see that sometimes, what saves us is more than we ever imagined. Even as he disappeared from view, a faint ripple shimmered across the water's surface, subtle, deliberate, and almost like a heartbeat. The entity remained, silent but present, a reminder that the swamp, like life itself, had mysteries yet to reveal. John had survived. He had learned. But the story, and the lessons, were far from over.